Mhm.
Hey everyone, I'm here with David Fields in Southern Ontario, in Guelph, and David took a course with us last year in Ontario, specifically the permaculture design course. And I have to say, David has been one of the most interesting students come through my program. Number one, he just kind of sits there with his wise, understanding, pedagogical way. But the other thing that makes David really interesting is that he basically worked for Greenpeace for a really long time, and I had some incredible conversations with David about activism and environmentalism, and just a super interesting dude. I mean, he's traveled all over the world and done all sorts of super interesting projects. And so having him in my course was really wonderful in terms of me learning about all the different ways of looking at activism and environmentalism that I'd never even thought about, to be totally honest with you. So David has since left the PDC and has been working on a number of different projects, including market gardening. He's got a mycelium project, and you've taken on some pretty interesting stuff personally as well, which maybe we'll get into in the interview. So welcome, David.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Good to see you again.
Yeah, totally. So tell us about your life before you took the permaculture design course.
My life before taking the PDC was very much focused on creating results and trying to save the planet. It was a driving passion that I was in contact with from a very young age. But just in a couple of years before we met, I was feeling very dissatisfied with the work. I was finding that my life was full of conflict, that results just weren't happening the way that I wanted them to, and I was very much working in the realm of policy and getting commitments from governments, and too often the result was we'd have to perform some sort of rearguard action to protect the gains that we had already made. And more, I was finding that in my personal life and interacting with people, I was actually having a greater impact in my everyday interactions with folks in terms of making a difference in my community and
Right.
making a difference in saving the planet. And so in looking around for a next step for me, looking for something new, I came across permaculture. And I've been a long time gardener, and at first it appeared to me as sort of organic gardening plus. But then scratching beneath the surface, it revealed so much more to me. And then I found you and sought you out in your PDC.
So what was your biggest struggle before? You kind of hinted at it there a little bit, but what was your biggest struggle before taking this course?
The biggest struggle for me was to actually make real things happen on the ground. That's really what I truly desired. I wanted to see real change on the ground. And I've experienced some of that in my activist experience in being at forest defense camps and other big actions like that, and the sense of community that would form around these actions. But they would always dissipate over time. And then it would be on to the next thing. And I was looking for something more permanent. I was looking for a community, a persistent community, people that I could work with, that was focused not just on getting a headline or pushing this particular policy platform, but making real change in people's lives.
So like long and slow and steady, basically.
That's it. Yes.
Yeah. So what did this cost you? Like that, was it frustration? Was it anguish? Like,
yeah, it was that, but it's really my life was lacking peace. That's really what I was seeking out, was the peace that comes with completing something, the peace that comes with an absence of conflict, right, and working and collaborating with people, the peace that comes with solving a problem. And too often that the policies that we might put forward in an advocacy setting don't really get to the root of the problem either. They deal with surface issues, and it always has to go through the mill of political compromise, always getting watered down, which ultimately won't solve the problem in the end. So with permaculture and permaculture working through communities, I think that we can be persistently self-supporting throughout a project, but also throughout our lifetime as well, because these are tools that can be applied in every aspect of our lives.
Right.
Yeah.
So have you moved beyond that struggle then as permaculture or this program, the PDC, has it helped you to see a path out of that frustration?
Yes, in fact, many different pathways. As I mentioned before, these are tools that you can use in every aspect of your life. And I can admit that before meeting you and taking your course, that I had a set of blinders on. I was very much focused on end results and not as aware of the process that I was working through, and not aware that I was just using the same thinking tools that I'd always been using. And of course, I'm going to get the same results.
Right.
And so I've seen opportunities for not just new projects, but I've seen opportunities in establishing new relationships. I've seen different facets of my life that I wasn't as clear on before as well. And I'd say that one of the greatest benefits that I've received from your course was you introducing me to holistic management. And it was something that I wasn't previously aware of. It's something that was an ideal that I strove towards, but I didn't really work it in any meaningful way.
Right.
Yeah. And so be able to take a whole systems view, and also to have the tools to be able to check in with myself and with my family and my colleagues regularly to make sure that we're on track is probably the thing that has benefited me the most.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you're looking at your life more holistically now. I'm curious, was the program hard for you, or was it enjoyable? Was it both?
It was very enjoyable. It was very intense, but in that excellent, intense way where you're just pushing your limits or being pushed to your limits, and it's uncomfortable at first, but you get past the wall and it just feels excellent. And it's like you're flying. That would be my experience. Although I'm weighted down with many pages of references to books that I have to read. So I think I have 5 pages of books that you referred us to. So I've got a lot of reading ahead. That's the wonderful thing, is that this is just the launching point for a whole new journey.
It's a great place to start. It's a bad place to end.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, for sure.
Well, I'm going to put you on the spot here. What were your top 3 insights out of the program?
Top 3 insights that... working at Zone Zero, my personal insight was that I tend to show up as a know-it-all, and I became distinctly aware of just how little I know, and just how important it is to ask questions instead of just researching on my own. Building out is that just how many people and how many different kinds of people there are that are interested in permaculture, that are, or at least are attracted to permaculture for their own reasons. And in our group, there were people that were working on their own properties, which is something that you might expect in a PDC, but also people working on interesting business ideas, but also people that were just looking to broaden their perspective. And so it really opened to my eyes to the kind of people that are interested in permaculture and the kinds of people that I should be seeking out in my circles as well. Because these people provided me with the opportunity to see things differently. And I think that the last insight that I'll share with you on it was that, was like I mentioned before, is that it could be applied in every aspect of your life. And using these principles, like for instance, accepting feedback and self-regulation. Now I go forward in all of my new enterprises in my everyday life, open and inviting feedback from people, whereas before, I'd organize myself so that I would not be getting feedback. So just doing an excellent job, because usually the feedback you're getting is negative feedback, and trying to avoid that. Whereas I've thrown the door wide open. And so some of the new ventures that I've taken in that are totally new for me, inviting that kind of feedback so that I can be better at what I do.
Yeah. Awesome. I've interviewed a couple of students now, more than a couple, quite a few. And on the conversation just before we started recording, every single one of them has lost weight or looks healthier. And I had no idea. The last Jen who took the program with you, said the same thing, that her health has completely changed. She said the 20 minutes we talked about diet completely transformed the way that she ate. And
yes,
excuse me, that's not something that I always anticipate as a result of a design course, but
yes. Well, it's very interesting because it's so true. I've had that experience in my life. So I've lost 35 pounds since I was at the PDC by changing my diet and changing the way that I organize my life. And it was the last thing that I would expect to happen, because one of the reasons why I sought you out is because of your engineering background, right? So I wasn't going to seeking out a transformational experience. I wanted the skills and the hard skills to go out there, and I wanted to, use the transit, and I wanted to, make the contour maps, and so I can get those results. But what I got instead was a lot of transformational work.
Awesome.
And so that included what I put into my body and my lifestyle choices.
So Dave, I mean, who would you say would benefit from this program?
An easy answer is to say everybody, but not everybody. Everybody who is interested in challenging themselves, and people who are seeking a new perspective. So going through the PDC and afterwards, becoming aware of some of the biases and some of the old ways of thinking that I carried with me. And it's interesting with Michael Pollan's new book, talking about his experiences with psilocybin and other psychoactive substances. And one of his speaking points has been about how it was described to him that human beings, over time, we develop patterns of thinking. If you imagine a tobogganing hill, and the more times you go down that slope, you build in ruts. And eventually it happens that no matter where you start from on the hill, you're going to fall into one of those ruts, and off you go. But that kind of experience you can have with psilocybin is like a fresh falling snow.
Right.
And so those ruts are filled in, and so that you can take new pathways.
Right.
And I would say that the PDC experience for me was similar to that, in that, especially the way that you deliver it, because it wasn't just one thing after the next. You really mixed it up, right? And so it wasn't really falling into a pattern or falling into a rut. There's always a fresh way to look at things, not just new things introduced, but a fresh new perspective on things that I had already dealt with many times before in my life. And so I was able to think about things differently and arrive at a different conclusion. So yeah, it was a great experience for me. And so people who are open to that kind of change in perspective, I strongly recommend it. And I thank you for it. Thank you.
Thanks, David. It was wonderful having you in the class. So you got some neat projects you're working on right now. You've got a market garden. You've got a mycelium project, potentially some secret mycelium garden planting going on around Guelph there. How are you going to use this in the next 5 years? What's your next 5-year plan look like, or general outline?
General outline? I think that it's an opportunity for me to go forward into my community and to build more and better relationships. When I was doing the holistic management piece and looking at the Wheel of Life tool, I ended up with a pork chop. I don't have a wheel, I have a pork chop. Right. And so that's good feedback. And so I'm changing my approach. And the next 5 years for me is about building better and more relationships by offering the skills that I have, but working with people, listening to what they want to achieve, and helping them find ways and breaking down barriers so that they can achieve what they want to. And so that is one aspect is through my mycelium project. So in teaching people how to grow mushrooms, I find that it's a good way to build a bridge to other topics like the soil food web and different approaches in permaculture, like food forests and guilds and so on. But really it's about helping to strengthen community bonds. So working at my daughter's school and being a resource for teachers and building dialogue there. It's been wonderful at my daughter's school in that I started that project expecting to help teachers with their gardening problems, but really what's happening is that more dialogue is happening. You've got more teachers that are talking to each other, and you actually have teaching staff and administrative staff now talking with maintenance staff, and people are starting to work together more so that these greening projects at their school can be more successful, where these conversations weren't happening before. So I'm finding that as I go out into the world, those are the experiences that I'm having, and they set me on fire, and so I want more of that.
Awesome. Before we round this out there, Dave, do you have any final thoughts that you want to share?
I would say that if you have any doubts at all about taking PDC, just throw them out and just do it.
Awesome.
Just do it.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Rob.
So folks, if you found that interesting, please hit the like button below, hit subscribe if you want to be notified when more of these interviews come up and other YouTube content that we put out as well. For the first time ever, we're letting go of our 60-page notebook, which all of our PDC grads get when they first start the course. And it's full of incredible information that we've put together over the last 10 years. So if you're interested in getting started on your permaculture career, you can find a link to download that for free below. If you're interested in getting in touch with David, I know that he teaches mycelium classes around Guelph, and so keep an eye out for that. And if you want to be directly connected with him, you can get in touch with me and I'll put you in touch with David. So thanks again so much, Dave. I really appreciate you taking the time today, and I hope that that we are able to chat again soon. Keep me informed with regards to what projects you're working on, and if you ever need to get the word out about them, I'd happily do that.
Great. Thank you so much, Rob.
Thanks, Dave.